Hey guys, welcome back to episode 3 of our new mobility series, Toes to Nose. In the previous episode, we talked about how to take care of your ankle and the muscles all the way up to your knee. In this episode, we're going to cover mainly muscles and how to release them from your knee to your hip. We're going to be covering a lot about the quads, the hamstrings, and the adductors. So I hope you guys are ready to go because I've got a lot for you, and let's get started. Next up is what I like to call the Kettlebell Monster Mash. We saw this in episode 2 with our calves, and we're going to repeat it for our adductors. Your adductors are a collection of muscles that run on the inside of the thigh and top of the groin. When it comes to the adductors, they tend to be really locked up for most people, and especially men, or even if you're squatting and doing lots of powerlifting. Now, the adductors tend to be really constricted near the top of the hip and upper groin region. And as you can see, that is a difficult area to get to unless you're getting a massage and to release. So the best way I've found is not to use a lacrosse ball. A foam roller does absolutely nothing in that area, but a kettlebell works fantastic. For this, we need a kettlebell that's big enough to have a thick handle and where it won't rock over easily. Now, this takes a little balancing act with your hands, but if you get in the position of a side plank, where your left elbow's down, right elbow's supported, we're going to go right up on the thickest portion of those fibers where they're most restricted, up near the top of the hip. I'm going to bring that handle high up in that groove, right outside the goods, and then I'm going to have my leg perpendicular to the handle, and then I just need to slowly let the pressure of the handle sink in that area. And for most of you, you're going to have to ease off pressure by pressing yourself up, but just slowly relax and then breathe like any time. Remember, 8 out of 10 on the pain scale. Now, we're not just going to hang out here. What we're going to start to do is, if you look at my knee, I'm going to start to dip and dive in and down. So I'm going to start with my chest facing towards the wall, and then I'm going to rotate my chest down towards the ground so I can work up in towards the origin of those adductor fibers where they meet the hip. So here is what it's going to look like. I'm going to start to rotate down and in as I drop my chest and drop my knee to the ground. That's going to work on those really thick and locked fibers of the adductor muscles. There's a lot of stuff going on through that area, so be careful. If you ever feel your heartbeat or your pulse through the kettlebell or in this region, you need to get off. You need to get off. If you feel a sharp shooting pain sensation or numbness or tingling, you need to get off that area, okay? But as long as you don't feel any of that, you just feel general muscular tension and tightness, we can work in this area by starting to groove where I rotate in and down, and that's going to start to work those fibers loose. Now, once I rotate in and down for a little bit, I'm going to start to do what I like to call frog kicks. So like a frog swimming, I'm going to kick, pull my knee up, almost like we'd see for a breaststroke. And if I get a spot that really sucks, I can hang out there and repeat what I just did. Or something that I've also found is if I do some internal rotation. So if I lift my ankle up and knee down and work in that area. Now, with our calf muscle, we started at the ankle and the Achilles and worked our way to the knee. We're going to reverse that. We're going to start at the hip and we're going to work our way down. So we started at that topmost inner groove close to the hip, right outside the goods, and then we're going to move the distance of the handle towards the knee. So one more time, support yourself in a side plank, go one distance handle towards the knee, and hang out there again. Feel the pressure. Let the weight of the kettlebell do the work. You don't need to push in. You just need to relax. And then once I'm here, we're going to start those downward rotations where we go across the fiber. And then you can kick. Woo! And then we're going to do some internal and external rotations. And I'm speeding this up because you should spend a lot of time in each area, but I just want to show you what will happen is that we will eventually hit a spot close to halfway between the knee and hip, and it's right about here that is really crucial. That's the spot where a muscle crosses over, called the sartorius, and it meets the adductors and gets stuck a lot. So about halfway between your knee and hip, there's going to be an area right here that you need to spend some more time on. You won't miss it. Guys, that's your kettlebell adductor smash. One more time, it's a long release, but it is crucial that you do this, and especially if you're squatting, deadlifting, or doing any major leg work. To be honest, when it comes to the adductors, sometimes they've been locked down and tight for so long that you need additional weight and to kind of smack the nervous system into letting you get more range of motion. A lot of people, when they go to stretch this area, have done the butterfly before. They've grabbed their feet, they've pushed their knees to the ground, but sometimes this just doesn't work that great and you don't get very far. So I want to introduce you to the Kettlebell Butterfly stretch. What we need is a mat for our butt, and we're gonna go up against the wall, and your goal is to get from the butt to your low back, to your shoulders, to the back of your head, as flat up against the wall as possible. So you need to really scoot yourself back. And then what we need to do is bend our legs, and you might need to scoot your butt back again a couple times. And I'm going to pull one kettlebell up. Now for this, I'm using 35s, but you might need to adjust. Heavy weight is totally okay here. Okay, and I'm going to pull the kettlebells on top of those quads, and then I'm going to make myself as tall as possible and let the kettlebells just rock those knees almost to the ground. Now, for those of you who have tight adductors, this is going to stretch intensely. If you have really flexible and mobile adductors, this might not be that much of a stretch. And what you can do is you can practice raising the weights up and back down as a strengthening drill. For the rest of us who are tight, we're just going to hang out here for 1 to 2 minutes. And I'm just going to enjoy that nice stretch. Remember, make sure you're tall and your butt is touching the wall and your back is arched and not rounded. Once I hang out here for about 1 to 2 minutes, we're going to do a little bit of a tug of war, okay? Or an arm wrestle. I know that's a little bit weird, but I'm going to be pushing down with the kettlebells while I push up with the knees. So we're not going anywhere, but we're in a little bit of a fight. So I want you to go ahead and push up with the knees, push down with the kettlebells, and you're gonna go nowhere with your knees, but you're gonna fight and push hard both ways. And we're gonna do that for about 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, I'm gonna stop pushing from the top and just relax, and you're gonna stretch deeper. And now I'm gonna hang out in that new position. Remember, I can do some butterfly, where I flap my knees like a butterfly, and that's going to strengthen. But then I can hang back down and repeat that same cycle a couple times, and we want to spend anywhere between 2 and 5 minutes, and then we take one kettlebell off, and that should be a lot of healthy work for your inside adductors. I'm going to rock one of my favorite stretches for the adductors or inner groin, which is the Kettlebell Wall adductor stretch. For many years as a cyclist, I had the tightest adductors from sitting on a bike all day. And a lot of people struggle in this area. So this is one of the easiest ways to start improving your mobility, and it's actually really relaxing. All we need is very, very light kettlebells. 8 kilograms is what I'm working off today, but you can go even lighter. But I cannot stress enough how safe you have to be when you're putting the kettlebells on and taking the kettlebells off, because you could drop this right on your face. So be very careful. If you don't feel comfortable with this variation, just go ahead and skip it. Now the way this is going to work is we're going to lay flat on the mat. We're going to take the kettlebells and we're going to turn to our side, flip on our back, and I'm going to load up the kettlebell by pulling my toe back towards my face. Now you can see how instantly how this could be a bad idea if you're not comfortable, because you could drop this straight on your face. So I'm going to load the kettlebells, and notice how I'm very close to the side of the wall. So when I turn, I want my butt touching the wall. Okay? Now once we're here, I want to make sure I scoot these kettlebells as far towards my ankle as I can, and then I want my back flat, and like I said, your bottom of your butt should be touching the wall. Now for this, I recommend starting with singles, so it's going to look like windshield wipers. So I'm going to take one leg slightly out, and I'm going to pin and push this leg into the wall. I'm trying to push the back of my calves, my hamstrings, the back of my knee. I'm trying to push everything and keep contact with the wall as much as possible. Now I'm going to keep this leg still, and slowly, without bending my knee or losing contact with the wall, or my back losing contact with the mat, I'm going to go out until I feel that I am at the limit in terms of the stretch. So I'm going to hang out right here. Now, the reason this is awesome is because not only are we stretching our adductors, since it's under weight, they're getting stronger too. So what I need to do is hang out here. I need to push this leg in. I can grab the floor and slowly slide back and in. Notice the shaking. That's because we're stretching in a weak position. Now I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to keep the right foot locked, then I'm going to slide the left down. And I recommend this is how you get started. And go to the point where you feel that, oh my gosh, that muscle's going to snap feeling. And hang out there, breathe, pushing everything into the wall, and then slide back up. So we start with windshield wipers to make sure we just get a pre-stretch. You don't want to go both at the same time, because the thing about this is if I just do one leg at a time, it's easy to bail. So if I get in trouble, I can just bail this foot. Now, once we've done a couple rounds of single legs, I want to make sure, like I said, keep flat up against the wall. We're going to do both legs together. Now, the hard thing here is there's no way to really bail out, so you need to be very careful and be generous with this range of motion. Okay? Don't try to push your limits here, especially if you've never done loaded stretching before. If you've never done stretching with weight before, you could very easily tear these muscles just due to the load in the deep stretch. So once I find that first position where it feels like things are going crazy, I'm going to hang out here and just enjoy the stretch. Keep your legs locked at all times, and you're pushing your heel and the back of your legs into the wall. Breathe. And we want to hang out here for a minimum of 2 minutes. So after 2 minutes, I'm going to slowly pull one leg in, the other leg in. I bend my knees, meet the kettlebells with my hands. And that is your kettlebell wall adductor stretch. All right, guys. What we're going to do next is what I call loaded frog rocks. For this, you're going to need an exercise mat and somewhere between a 25 and 45 pound plate. For most people, I found 45 pound works the best. Now, if you happen to be by yourself, this is going to be a little tricky, and I'm going to show you how to load the plate on your back. But if you're at a gym, please ask someone for help to put the plate on your back. If you happen to have something like a slider, these can be really helpful for this drill, but they're not necessary. And I like to use a PVC pipe or pole to measure my progress, and I think you should too. Now for this, what we're going to do is we're going to place our knees on the sliders, and these work well if they're perpendicular to our body rather than parallel with our body. So I'm going to place my knees on the sliders, and for this, when I'm by myself, I'm going to grab with both hands, and I'm going to bring it around town, and I'm going to scoot it up my back. Now be very careful, because you can drop that backwards on your heels very easily. So if you do not feel comfortable, do not load this up with a plate or ask someone for help. I want to scooch it up and make sure that my low back is arched so the plate does not fall off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just let my knees slide apart until they get stuck. You can place your hands wherever they feel comfortable. I feel comfortable with them further out. Now that I've got my knees split apart and I'm at that first place where I get a good stretch, I'm going to hang out here and just breathe and relax. Now for my toes, I can be doing one of three things. I can stretch my big toe, as I am now. I can drop the ankle or inside of the foot down and work a little internal rotation of my hip, or I can just be lazy with my toes. All three have their own benefits and drawbacks, and I want you to work all three on different times. Now, once we've hung out here for about 30 seconds or longer, we're going to get a little bit of a pre-stretch. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to go ahead and imagine there's a watermelon between my knees, and I'm going to try to crush in without my knees moving. So I'm going to squeeze this imaginary space between my knees, and we're going to do that for about 10 seconds. And once I get done squeezing, I'm going to relax, breathe out, and try to push my knees further apart. So once again, here we go. I'm going to squeeze. I'm trying to crush that watermelon between my knees. Crush, crush, crush. Maximum tension. In 5 seconds, I'm going to try to push my knees further apart and breathe out and relax in 3, 2, 1. Notice how it can get a little further. Now, I can repeat that for a couple rounds, or what I can start to do now is the frog rock, where while keeping an arch back, I'm going to rock my butt back towards my heels. And since I'm spread out quite a ways, this is going to be an intense and awesome stretch for that groin and adductor area. Notice how when I rock back, I do not want to round my low back. To keep the stretch, keep an arch in your low back. I can pause back here and walk to the side. That's going to hit a little different angle. I can walk to the other side. If the plate starts to slip, just push it back up. I can rock quickly. I can drop my heels, okay? And I can rock here. But every so often, once I start to feel like I'm getting a little more range, I'm going to pull back and I'm going to perform that watermelon crush again and repeat by crushing the watermelon in between my knees. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then trying to pull those knees further apart. Remember, do not hold your breath. Breathe calmly. And once we're ready to, I'm going to slide the knees in. I'm going to grab the plate, bring it around front, and pull out. Maybe you have knee pain, but you've never been able to figure out what is causing it. A lot of times knee pain can be caused by a muscle called the popliteus that is on the back side of the knee. It's a little guy that helps to unlock the knee and can be a hidden culprit when it comes to pain. We're going to use a softer release ball to make sure we get this guy because there's a lot of delicate structures on the back side of the leg. When you're doing this, if you feel tingling or numbness, you need to ease off because you're probably on a delicate structure. What we're going to do is we're going to start with a straight leg release of the popliteus. So go on the back side of the knee, between the calf and the hamstrings, right in the middle, and I'm going to go ahead and lift off and just move the ball around and spot hunt. There's my popliteus because he's sore and angry. And all I'm going to do here is hang out. I don't need to push into the ball. I can do some ankle circles. I can externally and internally rotate my leg to go across the fibers. And we want to spend some time on this guy because he is often a hidden culprit that most people have never worked on when it comes to the knee. Another way you can do this is by going on top of your knees and doing a shin box where I place the ball in that pocket and then I go ahead and lean back onto my calf and hamstring. Now you've got to make sure it's in the right place and you can adjust it, but once I'm here I can rock from side to side and add my own self-pressure in that area. That is another way. You have to pick which size ball works best for this release, a larger or smaller, but make sure it's soft and not a lacrosse ball because that area is very sensitive. And that's your popliteus muscle. If you happen to have a slider at your gym, you can perform a really cool loaded stretch of your adductor and groin muscles. All you have to do is place the slider underneath one foot and find where it fits best. We want to have something like a puller stick to create tension to make the stretch better and to safely bring us back up from this stretch. I'm going to plant my feet, and what I'm going to do, just like the Karate Kid, I'm going to slowly let my legs slide out. I'm in no rush, trying to keep my feet even. I don't want it to slide forward or backwards. And as I get down further, I'm going to squeeze my pull and stick for added tension to make the stretch even better. I'm pushing and sliding until I get to my end range. I'm going to pause here. I'm going to hold the stretch. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to spend 1 to 2 minutes here. And once I'm ready to come out of the stretch, this is why we have the stick or the pull. I go and then slide back up and out. Simple but effective. All right, squad. Next up is the IT Band Meltdown. Now, for those of you who don't know, the IT band is on the outside of the body and runs from the knee to the hip and acts like a shock absorber for activities such as running. If you are a runner, you might have had or had issues with your IT band and had ITB syndrome. The problem is the way most people, trainers and coaches tell you to take care of your IT band is by stretching or by grabbing a foam roller and foam rolling your IT band. Maybe you've done this before. Maybe you've been told to stretch your IT band on the outside of your body. The issue is the IT band is super dense, thick, and we cannot scratch the surface with a stretch or with a foam roll. So when it comes to the IT band, stretching it is impossible. You cannot stretch it. And when it comes to foam rolling, it just doesn't really do much. So I've found a way that's a little bit more effective. And the goal is to not stretch or do anything to the IT band, but to help the IT band glide better over the outside muscles of the leg. What we're going to do is, if you see the leg, there is a little separation between the top and bottom, the hamstrings and the quad, and the IT band runs in the middle or between the two. So we're going to take 2 release balls. I would not recommend lacrosse balls. Tennis balls are something that has a little give. And we're going to start at the hip and work our way down in that little canal all the way to where the balls will meet the outside of the knee. I call this the IT Band Meltdown. So we're going to start in that little canal or gap right outside the hip bone. And I'm going to put the balls parallel with my leg, and I'm going to cross and bend my leg over. And what we're going to do is we're going to start to roll the balls down towards my hamstrings like I'm trying to strip meat off a rib bone. Now, our goal is, remember, not to tackle the IT band, but to create some space and the ability for that IT band to slide. Once again, you cannot stretch your IT band. If anyone tells you that, it is impossible to do, and foam rolling doesn't really help. So we're not on the IT band directly, we're on the space between the IT band and the other muscles. So once I spend some time stripping and going cross fiber, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to hold my thigh, and then I'm going to kick and straighten my leg. That's going to contract some of the muscles of the quadricep. And what we're trying to do, once again, is create some friction where we can slide and move that IT band better. All we move is the balls one distance, and I'm going to repeat the same thing. So if you notice, I'm going to get in that space, and then I'm going to roll down towards my hamstring like I'm stripping meat off the bone. And you just have to pick yourself up a little bit. But then after a few rounds, I'm going to hold, and then I'm going to kick my leg in, and then when you kick out is when it's going to be quite tender. And spend some time in each spot. Normally when you get halfway between the knee and hip is when it's going to be its most tender, especially as you get down towards the knee. So I can re-strip or cross fiber that, and then I'm going to hold, kick, extend back in. Of course, make sure you don't only treat one side, you treat both sides. If you run and you've had problems in the outside of your knee, don't just focus on the IT band. Even though this will help, you need to go up in your glute, because the IT band, 90% of it attaches to the glute. So, IT band meltdown, start from the hip, work your way to the knee. Next, we're going to work on one of the most locked up places in the quadriceps muscles. This area tends to be located right on the edge of that ridge of that innermost quad, which we call the vastus medialis in my world, or you can think the inside quad. Notice how we have a ridge, and we're going to go right about 4 inches away from that knee on that ridge. So if you have a softball size release ball or one that's bigger, that will work better. If you have one that's about this size, I recommend using a yoga block to elevate it off the ground so we can do this release well. I'm going to use my larger release ball for this one, and I'm going to lay on my stomach, and I'm going to bring my knee up into 90 degree. We're going to go on that ridge line one more time, about 4 inches away from the knee, where I place that quad right on top, and I'm going to hang out here. Now, just like anything, hang out, spend 30 seconds to a minute, and a lot of times when you first get on this spot, you might not feel anything. Other times, the second you get on it, you'll be like, ooh, okay? Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift my leg up in the air, and we're going to start a series of slow kicks. So I'm going to kick my heel to my butt. We're going to stretch that quad, and then I'm slowly going to kick my heel and straighten my leg forward. That's when you're going to feel that release the most. We're going to repeat this back and forth slowly right on top of that quad ridge line. Now after a couple rounds, I'm going to scoot the ball on the ridge line closer to my hips, and then I'm going to repeat that same sequence. Once again, if you get in a really tight spot, just hang out there, or a spot that's really tender, hang out there. You do not have to kick further if you don't have to. Okay? And we want to breathe. If you ever hold your breath or tense your neck, you're releasing too hard. And work your way up from the knee all the way about midway to the hip. And you're going to find out that this area tends to cause a lot of trouble for people when they run or they squat, especially if you've ever had pain on the top side of your knee. You need to be doing this release. So, one more time. Here's that ridge line. Go ahead and place that ball right on top of that ridge line. Work your way up with your kicks, and that should release that area well. Next up is one of the most restricted places in the human body. In fact, it's in the top 5 most restricted. This is called the ASIS. In my world, we know that as the front part of the hip bone. If you've ever felt that little bony notch or that part of your hip that sticks out right in front, that is your ASIS. I want you to think of it like a train station. All these muscles of the legs and the hip flexors happen to run and connect right to this little hook of the hip. That is why it tends to be very restricted. Now for this, I found that a softball-sized release ball works best, but a lacrosse ball can work well too. So what I want you to do is slide your hand down until you find the front of your hip bone, and then what we're going to do is we're going to go right underneath that little hook or notch, not on top of the bone, but right underneath of it. So that should be right about here. All we're going to do is place the ball on that area, and then I'm going to cross my hands over each other and lay my forehead down. Now, all we need to do is just relax and let the ball sink in, and then we want to breathe. Just like any of our releases, hang out here for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, and then after that, we want to start contracting. So for that, if you watch my right leg, I'm going to flex my quad and my glute on my right leg, and that's going to intensify the stretch. Hang out there, relax back down. Contract, straighten that leg. And for a lot of you, that is going to be plenty of pressure, and you're going to just need to keep here. Contract and straighten. Now, say you don't feel too much there, then we need to head to the next step. What we're going to do next is with a straight, strong leg, I'm going to lift my leg into extension, and that is going to further intensify that stretch on that train station or the ASIS. Now, as I lift the heel higher, the stretch gets bigger, but we can also do a few other things. What we can do is I can bring my knee up towards my elbows, and what that's going to do is that's going to cross the fibers and all the different train tracks and create some health in that area. Now, you can also lift your leg and then kick your heel towards your butt. I don't want you to think that there's rules. I want you to be creative and twist and move that leg in any way and shape or form where you feel like it's releasing that area. Be creative. Remember, different angles hit different parts of the train tracks, so don't just lift this leg straight up and back. Change the angle, and you will change what part of that train track you are working on. Now, we want to spend about 2 to 5 minutes on each side, and I want you to repeat in different angles, in different heights, and remember, always contract your glutes and your backside to help the stretch be a little better. Our next stretch is called the loaded front split. This is quite an elaborate setup, but for this, all you need is something underneath your knee like a pillow, and then something to measure your progress like a PVC pipe, pole, or stick, or anything. Now, I have the ability to have the bars, the slider disc, the mat, and of course, if you're at a gym and have this equipment, go ahead and use it. And I just wanted to show you the full setup anyway. Now for this, we're going to tackle 2 birds with 1 stone. We're going to stretch both the hamstring under load and the opposite side hip flexor. So this is a wonderful stretch that we can do a lot out of. And unlike other hamstring stretches where you just touch your toes, this will actually give you long-term improvements in mobility instead of a temporary quick fix. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with 1 leg on the slider disc if we have it. Remember, if you don't have the disc, no worries, just repeat without. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to perform a basic hip flexor stretch for the knee that's on the mat, pad, or pillow. For the hip flexors, what most people commonly do is they lunge forward with a hyper arched back, super arch, and they stick their hip out, and they're just pile driving that hip flexor and not getting a lot of results. All we need to do is focus on squeezing the butt of the knee that's on the pad. So in this case, my right glute. All I'm going to do is I'm going to squeeze my right glute so hard that if I had an imaginary big Texas belt buckle, it would start to tilt towards my nose. So once again, no bend in the hips, squeeze the butt, that belt buckle tips up, and that's our starting point. You should already start to feel a stretch in that hip flexor and quad. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to imagine that we're crushing or closing a pair of scissors with our knees crunching together. So there's going to be no movement of my knees, but I'm going to act like I'm crushing a can between my two knees while squeezing this glute as hard as I can, and I'm just going to push that hip forward slightly without hyper arching my back, and I should feel a good, healthy stretch in this hip flexor. The key is squeezing the butt, not just lunging forward and then really arching that back. Okay, one more time. Squeeze the butt, crush the knees together, and just pinch here, feel the stretch, and then I'm going to hold for 10 seconds to 15 under maximal tension, and then I'm going to breathe out in 3, 2, 1. Now the reason why we take care of the hip flexor is so we can slide out. Now here's what I'm going to do. After I stretch my hip flexor on the right side, I'm going to lengthen my left leg, and then I'm going to start to slide out until I get that initial first stretch. That's where I start to feel the stretch in my hamstring. Now here's the most important part for this loaded stretch. If you look, both of my hips are square in front of me. What's going to happen is if your hip flexor is super tight, you're going to start to turn your body out. So if I would go out and my body starts to turn, what I need to do is I need to scoop back in and keep my hips square. If we go out like this, I might get the hamstring stretch and the groin, but this hip flexor is running away from the stretch. So make sure under all circumstances, you keep the hips square. So now that I've got the hips square, we're going to do a couple things. The first is I'm just going to hang out here, and if you need something to hold on to or take off a little pressure, that's why I use these bars. You can use a chair, box, or bench. Now, we are going to start flossing our hamstring on the opposite side by pointing our toe and pulling our toe back. We don't want to bend this knee at all. Point the toe, pull it back, and for a lot of you that can be pretty intense. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull my toe towards the ceiling, and then I'm going to rotate the toe as far as I can inside, and that might not be too bad, but for most people this is going to be where it's quite extreme of a stretch. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try to rotate my pinky toe out, and for most people that's going to hit that outside hamstring, the calf, the backside of the knee, and I'm going to now try to bow forward. So rotate out as far as you can. Notice I'm pretty locked up there. Keep your spine tall. If I need to, use a bench or box. Do not round your back like the Hunchback of Notre Dame. Keep your chest tall, and then I want you to just pull your chest towards your knee. That can be quite an intense stretch. And what our goal is we should be able to rotate to the point where our pinky toe touches the ground. I wanted to show you this side because I'm really tying this side. Watch my opposite side foot when I go to do that knife's edge or pinky toe stretch. So I roll out, and notice I can almost get that pinky toe towards the ground. There's the difference between the two sides. So eventually I want to be able to get that pinky toe to touch the ground with a straight and locked leg. Then I grab, I keep a flat back, and then I bow, and you'll feel the stretch from the outside of the ankle all the way outside the calf to what's called the fibular head, which we learned from last episode, hamstring, all the way up to the sciatic nerve. Okay? So we've stretched the hip flexor. We've done our little toe flosses. We've rolled out to the outside edge, and we've done a few rounds of nice edge. Remember, don't round. Take your time. Understand that we're stretching while strengthening, so it takes time to build up strength in this position and comfort. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to act like I'm pushing a door or a wall with my front foot while I kick backwards and push a door with my back foot. So for 10 seconds, I'm going to push forward, push backwards under maximal tension. One more time for about 5 to 10 seconds. You'll have to find out what works best for you. And then I'm going to relax, breathe out, and slide further in 4, 3, I'm pushing, 2, 1, exhale. And remember, you have to make sure as you slide out, we don't want to see this where my belly button and hips turn out, because that means I'm running away from the hip flexor. So if you need to, if you catch your hip turning out, slide back and make sure you're squeezing that glute to take care of the hip flexor. Now, in a perfect world, we'd spend about 10 minutes on the right side, 10 minutes on the left side for 20 minutes total, because this is taking care of your hamstrings, your calves, your hips, a lot of stuff. And guess what? Most people's hamstrings are completely locked down, and a lot of people can't touch their toes. So if that's you, you need to spend at least 5 minutes on the right, 5 minutes on the left. And go through those same steps again. We want to do our toe flosses, and do not rush this. Do not move quickly. Do not jerk when you're out in this position. Jerk or pull, or okay? Then I'm going to do my rotations inside, outside, and then I'm going to do my bow for that nice edge. Remember, the nice edge is where I roll that pinky toe as close to the ground as I can get. Then I'm going to do that plank or that isometric hold where I squeeze every inch of my body. I'm pushing my front foot out, my back foot back, and then I relax, breathe out, and slide further. Once we're ready to, we can do a couple cool things from this position. I'm going to show you from the other direction. Now, once I've gotten a good stretch out of my hamstring, we can do something really cool. I'm going to move this out of the way, and very slowly, I can rotate into what's called a Cossack stretch or side lunge, and I can repeat those frog rocks that we saw earlier once again. And this is going to stretch a different portion of these adductors or inside groin. Notice all I have to do is then slowly rotate back, and you can transition and work between the two because it is easy to switch and work on both at the same time. And once you're ready, pull in slowly and then switch sides. One of the most important things we have to remember is the best way to keep a new range of motion is to strengthen that range of motion. So all these stretches and releases will help you and benefit you, especially when it comes to flexibility, pain, and range of motion. But if we don't add strength, our body will not keep it, and those improvements will be short-term and short-lived. So one of my favorite ways to keep mobility and flexibility in our hip and leg region is with the Cossack lunge. Now, a lot of you will call this a side lunge. That's okay, but in my world, it's called the Cossack lunge. For this, it can be done with body weight, but performed best with a kettlebell and load. We're going to pull our kettlebell up, and the more range of motion you have out of your hips, the further apart your legs can be. If you're really tight, you need to walk in close. So for this, I'm going to grab the kettlebell by the horns, and I'm going to rock down into a deep side lunge. Now, you might not be able to get this far right away due to limitations of your hip or the muscles of your groin. But at the same time, you should be able to get into a full range lunge by improving the mobility of your hips and the flexibility of your groin. This exercise is going to strengthen and stretch at the same time. What we want to remember is the knee should go in the same direction as the toes. So if you do this exercise and your knee collapses in and your toe points out, you need to spend some more time on your groin, your adductors, and flexibility, or you need to step in. So if you go to lunge down and that knee cranks in, we need to have the knee in the same direction as the toes. One more time. Pull up. You can even take the kettlebell into the rack position. I'm going to rock down and back up. If you're able to hit a full depth squat here, you should be able to hit a full range of motion squat here. If you get stuck in that area or you perform this exercise and it goes terribly or you can't get down at all, this is a sign that you need flexibility, mobility, and strength through your hips and your legs. I hope today's episode of Toes to Nose was helpful. In next week's episode, we're going to start a 3-part series on the hips, because we all know that those hips do not lie. So guys, if you enjoyed this episode, give me a thumbs up. If you got any questions, comment below, and I will see you in the next one.